For, wow, almost a century now, McKinsey Company has been the gold standard in management consulting. I mean, they're the trusted advisors in the world's most powerful boardrooms. But there's this shadow that's been growing right alongside that shiny reputation, a shadow of some really high-stakes controversies. So today, we're going to dig into this pattern and see what it tells us about the firm's real culture.
And this quote, man, this just gets right to the heart of the whole thing. It comes from some deep investigative reporting, and it perfectly captures this tension that seems to run through McKinsey's entire history. So you have to ask, right? How did a firm that built its entire brand on discretion and integrity end up here? Well, let's break it down.
All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to explore this whole story in 6 parts. First, we'll look at what I'm calling the gold standard paradox. Then, we'll dive into how they seem to be making their own rules. After that, we'll hit 2 big case studies, one on profiting from a crisis and another on working for the government. We'll look at the pattern of consequences and then wrap it all up by asking the big question: can the firm change?
Okay, first up, the gold standard paradox. This really gets into that fundamental contradiction at the very heart of McKinsey. It's that classic story, image versus reality.
I mean, just look at this slide. It lays out the disconnect so clearly. On the one side, you've got the brand they've spent decades building, the elite, trusted advisor, analytically rigorous, the absolute gold standard. And then you look at the other side, and that's the reality. A constant, relentless drumbeat of really damaging headlines. We're talking massive legal settlements, corruption allegations, even criminal convictions at the firm's highest levels.
So you gotta wonder, where does this massive disconnect come from? Well, investigative reports suggest it's not just, a few bad apples. It's something rooted way deeper, right in the firm's culture. And it all comes down to this idea of exceptionalism. And to understand this culture of exceptionalism, you have to hear this. An internal McKinsey history document. It shows just how highly the firm thinks of itself. Get this. Partners in the document literally compare the company to the Jesuits and the Marine Corps. They describe themselves as deeply principled seekers of knowledge and truth. I mean, one partner even claimed the firm's values were more powerful than those of the Catholic Church. No joke.
And see, that right there is the core issue. This mindset, this belief that you're just different, that you're special. Maybe that flies in the private world of corporate consulting, but it creates massive problems when McKinsey starts working with governments or in really legally sensitive areas. Their belief in being exceptional just smashes head-on into the real world of rules, disclosure, ethics, and oversight. Okay, let's look at our first case study to see what this looks like in practice. And we're going to start with one of the biggest, most tragic public health disasters in recent memory, the American opioid crisis. So back in 2021, McKinsey shelled out a massive amount of money. We're talking $574 million to settle investigations from 49 states. And this was all about its role advising Purdue Pharma, the company that made the highly addictive painkiller OxyContin. So what exactly did McKinsey do? Why the massive settlement? Well, according to the lawsuits, the firm actually developed strategies for Purdue to turbocharge the sales engine for OxyContin. That included advising the drug maker to specifically target doctors who were already prescribing huge volumes of these opioids. Just let that sink in.
All right, for our second case study, let's switch gears and look at McKinsey's work with the U.S. government, specifically a really controversial contract they had with Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or as most of us know it, ICE.
So McKinsey was already doing work for ICE. But internal documents show that in 2017, after the Trump administration issued a new executive order, the project's focus shifted. The firm started advising the agency on how to hire thousands of new officers and this is the crucial part, on how to cut costs for handling migrant detainees.
Okay, and this is where things get really stark. On one hand, you have McKinsey's public claim. They said, "We did not recommend a reduction in the quality of food or healthcare." Pretty clear, right? But then you see this internal icy email about the project, and it says something totally different. It says, McKinsey's people are looking for ways to cut or reduce standards because they are too costly. It's a direct contradiction. And here's the thing. These cases, they're not just isolated incidents. They're not outliers. When you step back and look at the last decade or so, you start to see a very clear and honestly a pretty troubling pattern of ethical problems that have led to some really serious consequences.
Just take a look at this timeline. It really shows a recurring cycle of scandal. You've got 2012, when their former CEO, Rajat Gupta, was actually convicted of insider trading and sent to prison. Fast forward to 2018, the firm has to return over $60 million in fees in South Africa because of a massive corruption scandal. Then in 2021, the new CEO, Kevin Sneeder, gets voted out by the partners after just one term, partly because of the fallout from the opioid crisis. And of course, that same year, they agree to that record-breaking opioid settlement. It's a pattern.
So, after all of this, you're left with this massive question. And it's not just a question for McKinsey, but for its clients and for the thousands of brilliant graduates who dream of working there. The question is, can a firm like this actually, fundamentally, change?
And believe me, the debate is fierce. You have aspiring consultants, the best and the brightest, trying to weigh that prestige and those huge salaries against the firm's track record. They're asking if the paycheck is worth what some have called ethical gymnastics. Then you have the failed reforms, right? The CEO, Kevin Sneeder, who tried to make the firm more transparent and selective about clients, well, he got voted out. The partners apparently rejected his leadership. And this speaks to a bigger idea, that these firms are just inherently mercenary. They take on any client who pays. Now, for its part, the firm insists it has stronger ethics review processes now, but you can see why people are skeptical.
And that really brings us back to the central question we've been circling this whole time. With its entire reputation on the line, will McKinsey's next chapter be defined by profit or by principle? Can a firm that's built on a belief in its own exceptionalism, a firm whose partners literally rejected a leader who is pushing for more accountability, can it truly reform itself from the inside? Or will the temptation of profit always win out over principle? That right there is the billion-dollar question facing McKinsey today.